In the world of ReZero, our hero Subaru is presented with many more choices than it may already seem. There are certain points of Subaru's story that test his character and lead to him developing as a person. Although Subaru tends to pass this test of character and grow, we get to see what would happen if he decided to fall into sin and make the wrong decision in many side stories. For example, what would happen if Subaru and Rem decided to run away from Lagunica rather than face Betelgeuse and the White Whale in season 1 of the anime? Or what would happen if Subaru never decided to call for help with the thugs and Elsa at the very beginning of the story? These side stories explore these possibilities and are referred to as if roots. These if roots typically cripple Subaru's character in relation to the sin they represent one way or another, as he failed to develop the character to overcome them. So each Subaru is different and unique in their own way, despite them all being the same character. In this video, I'll be explaining all of the Subarus as best as I can, while still leaving enough out to encourage you guys to read all of the stories except for one, as the side stories are still quite important to the main story for their own reasons. With that said, if you enjoy content such as this, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe. Massive spoiler warning, and now, let's get into it. So of course, the first Subaru we're going to be starting with is the main one, Envy. Our main Subaru is specifically referred to as Envy due to it being a reference to the Witch of Envy itself and Subaru's entire journey to save her. This Subaru stands out as he's the one who actually progresses the story, saves everybody, and can overcome all challenges in his way unlike the others. There's not much to say as we all know the deal with this Subaru specifically. This is the man who conquered the Pleiades watchtower, the one who has slain many Sin archbishops, and the hero of Wallachia. He's done it all. The last time we see him is in Arc 9, where Aldebaran manages to catch him off guard and seal him, actually allowing Subaru to be defeated and requiring saving from the rest of the cast. The author has implied that we will not be seeing Subaru for a while due to his current circumstances, and that has definitely been the case. When Subaru finally returns to the story, he's more than likely going to have a lot on his hands that he needs to deal with, thanks to Aldebaran. Now, obviously, I'm not going to sit here and use too much time on the main Subaru, as I know most are here to find out about all the other ones. And you should be reading through the main story already, as I can make a 1-hour explanation on the main Subaru and it will not even do him justice. Pride Subaru is the first deviation from the main path that we will be introduced to. This if story proposes the scenario of Subaru choosing to never seek Reinhard's help in the beginning of the story. Subaru here had way too much pride in himself and believed that in this new world he was supposed to be unstoppable. This Subaru would pass away over 80 times trying to get past Elsa specifically, and this would drive him crazy and begin to corrupt his character. After all these deaths and him being changed due to the amount of times he's died and just how miserable the experience was, he would go and finally ask the city guards for help. Elsa would defeat those guards just as easily, reaffirming to Subaru that Elsa was simply unstoppable. But then a man would show his face, Reinhard von Estrella. He would one-shot Elsa, and this demonstration of power would not cause Subaru to admire him this time around. But instead, he felt nothing but hatred for the swordsman. After Elsa is left near dead by Reinhard, Subaru would lead the guards away from Elsa as they were searching for her to finish her off, and he'd go ahead and recruit her in his team as he thought her strength would be of use to him. Subaru, despite saving Amelia here, is still interested in her, but remember that at this point he doesn't really know much of her, so he's just left alone in thinking about her as he didn't directly engage with her in the loop that he managed to finally save her. So Subaru ends up joining the witches cult in order to learn more information about Amelia. And 2 months pass in the story, with us coming back to Subaru finding out about the royal selection and by proxy learning of Amelia's name and her participation in it. As Subaru is living with Betelgeuse at the time, Betelgeuse mentions that they're gonna have to find Amelia in order to have Satella possess her body, and this causes Subaru to turn on his so-called best friend and take him out after 400 attempts full of preparation, planning, and help from Elsa to eliminate his extra bodies. Subaru then meets up with Rosewall in the shadows in order to convince him to allow the Amelia camp to take the credit for Betelgeuse's defeat, and we know how slimy Rosewall is, so he does take this deal. As the story continues, Subaru does a lot of evil to many characters in the story, some that deserved it like Regulus, and some that didn't like Julius. But it's not just this that displays the tragedy of Subaru making the wrong decision. We also get to see what happens to those who never had Subaru present in their lives in the first place, as Crush and her entire camp are erased from history due to being defeated by the white whale and never having Subaru to set up the plan and teams and all that stuff. Tappe does a great job with the side stories, and I implore you to read them for yourselves when you can, because I'm simply breaking them down into quick and tiny bits. This story eventually reaches its climax when Subaru creates a contract with a fire spirit and uses it to set all of the kingdom of Lagunica ablaze, taking the lives of many and destroying most of the kingdom. After 10,000 loops, Subaru finally came to his answer, the method to finally defeat Reinhard. The act of destroying the kingdom causes Reinhard to appear once more. Subaru expresses here how much he hates Reinhard, but he knew that taking his life was an impossible ask. He's tried to take Reinhard's life in all sorts of ways, many times over, but it was all pointless. But if he couldn't take his life, he would take his name. Reinhard is the Sword Saint of Lagunica, one that dedicates himself to protecting the kingdom at all cost. This same kingdom that has just been eviscerated by Subaru himself. And Reinhard for the first time expresses nothing but rage and coldly states that he needs to take Subaru's life. But this is when Elsa comes in to save Subaru and distract Reinhard, which gives Subaru the opportunity to escape and run into Emilia. Here, he explains to Emilia what he has done to become the ultimate evil of the ReZero world, and by slaying him, Emilia can become the ultimate good, this guaranteeing her victory in the royal candidacy. He then declares himself the Sin Archbishop of Pride and charges in to attack Emilia, which causes her to take his life and for him to rest permanently. He's satisfied with his fate here and feels as if there's nothing more for him to do, so he literally loses return by death and his story ends here. Wrath Subaru is the second deviation from the main Subaru that we be introduced to. If you remember the entire ordeal of Rem being cursed by the shaman and passing away soon after in season 1, it's around this time. Subaru is faced with his second test, as Ram has cornered Subaru and Beatrice at the edge of a cliff, and Beatrice gives him the opportunity to directly combat Ram. In this timeline, instead of remaining patient enough to keep resetting the world until he found the perfect outcome, Subaru leans into his wrath and chooses to combat Ram with Beatrice's help. Beatrice holds off Ram for a bit as Subaru attempts to escape from the battle, but Ram eventually catches up to him and tries to choke him out. However, she passes out as she was attacked by mob beasts while she was trying to chase Subaru. Subaru then grabs a rock and deals the finishing blow on the incapacitated Ram. A couple of years pass and Subaru has accomplished a lot in the world, arguably possessing the might of an entire nation or maybe even two under his command. Not only this, but he was a pretty good entrepreneur with a good amount of money. But this isn't a happy story. This powerful organization that Subaru led was referred to as Pleiades. Many powerful mercenaries are within Subaru's control, and not only this, Halibel and Cecilis are now his right and left hand men, willing to do almost anything for Subaru. Interestingly enough, this story was written a long time before we'd actually meet the two in the main story, so this is how many people knew about them before they were even introduced. Anyway, Puck eventually comes to Subaru and generates a plan with him to eradicate everybody at Roswell's mansion and capture Emilia after doing so, as Puck felt as if Emilia was not safe there anymore, and she'd be better left in the hands of Subaru. Subaru agrees and even takes the life of Beatrice himself. Halibel and Cecilis handle everything else in the mansion. After this, they capture Emilia and keep her in a cage where she can always be safe. And they also capture Frederica, who serves as the maid for the Pleiades at the Pandemonium. Now, the Pandemonium is the headquarters of Pleiades, and it also has a side effect of turning off divine blessings. Now, I'm sure a good amount of you know where this story is heading. Some more time passes and Subaru is now known as the Purge King. He takes lives off of a whim, usually flipping a coin after a conversation with anybody he deems disposable. Emilia at this point also has Stockholm Syndrome and idolizes the person Subaru has become. Eventually, Reinhard storms the organization due to the news of Roswell's death going public and reaches Subaru, Cecilis, and Halibel. Cecilis wants to fight Reinhard one-on-one, so Halibel takes Subaru and they escape. Now keep in mind, Reinhard has the vast majority of his divine protections either disabled or weakened due to some effects of the Pandemonium building. This makes no difference though, as Reinhard manages to defeat Cecilis and Cecilis escapes with his life intact. Now Reinhard also finds Amelia attempting to free her, but she's willing to die for Subaru, so her and Puck in his beast form also combat Reinhard, just to lose, but she also escapes. Halibel and Subaru end up separating as Halibel goes back to fight Reinhard for the sake of Subaru, but he actually dies. Now Subaru is approached by Amelia at the end, but he goes into a mental breakdown as he no longer trusts anybody due to all their minds just being messed up, and he goes into a secret room where he's had Ram prisoner for the entire time and allows her to finally take his life. Now Sloth Subaru is actually a Subaru with a pretty good ending, and honestly, he's not a bad human either. This is a story that actually feels as if it's an alternative Subaru who just took a different path in life and became a different person. It's also why I believe reading these stories are important, as they get into the lore and world building of ReZero that the main story can't get into without forcing it. This alternate path opens up when Subaru asks Rem to run away from Lagunica and start a new life altogether, as the weight of Betelgeuse and the White Whale were simply too much for him to bear. Instead of Rem talking Subaru back onto the main storyline, she actually takes the offer and the two run away as everybody they know and love dies. Now we time skip to Subaru and Rem living together, and luckily for them, Halibel is their neighbor. Subaru has no idea that Halibel is one of the strongest characters in existence, and he just treats Halibel as if he's some annoying guy who picks on him a lot. It's one of those relationships where the bros argue a lot, but you know they actually like each other. If you notice, Halibel is like a brother to Subaru in every timeline they meet. Also, Subaru needs a job because Rem is the only one with a job as an elementary school teacher, and she's bringing in all the money while Subaru just bums around. He does eventually find a job as a maid, and another time skip happens. Here we see that everything's going well for Subaru and Rem meets up with Subaru after he gets out of work one night. The two walk home together, but they're eventually attacked by a beautiful white-haired woman in a black kimono with the ability to manipulate very powerful winds. This woman is powerful to a point where Rem can't even do much against her, and the couple just accept that they're going to die here and now. However, they're saved by Halibel, who easily destroys this woman and forces her to retreat. And this surprises Subaru because he just wasn't aware that Halibel is one of those folk who are built different. Anyway, Rem collapses soon after Halibel saves them, and Subaru brings her back to their home, while Halibel goes out looking for a doctor or really anybody that can help Rem out. Now this is where the same beautiful woman enters their home without any permission, but this time she's in a white dress instead of a black one. Subaru's freaking out here, but Rem is his wife and he has to protect her as best as he can, so he goes in to try to stop the girl from harming Rem, but something's different here. This time the girl was actually speaking, making witty jokes, and she wasn't really attacking Subaru but just defending herself from him. Subaru runs into her until she knocks him out, and Halibel returns with a medic to take care of Subaru and Rem. Subaru wakes up soon after Halibel's return, but Rem is still unconscious. Why? Well, it's not because she was really sick or hurt or cursed, anything like that, but she was actually just exhausted. And she was exhausted because she's pregnant with her and Subaru's child. Now this if story is way longer than the rest, and it's a pretty good and fun story. I suggest everybody go check this one out if you're only going to read one of them, but if you want to know how everything ends up and what's going with the white-haired girl, I'll explain it here, and you can look at the screen to check the time to skip if you don't want it to be spoiled. So first, the beautiful white-haired woman in the two different kimonos are actually two different people. The one in black is an Oni like Rem. This Oni has stolen Zarestia's, the white kimono woman's light ball. Now this light ball forced the black kimono woman to take the appearance of Zarestia, hence is why the two look exactly alike. Zarestia herself is a great spirit with a tragic past that caused her to become a calamity that thinks of nothing but slaughter, but her light ball being separated from her allows her to be something of a decent person without trying to eradicate everything in sight. Zarestia thought that Rem had stolen her light ball, but she wasn't going to harm Rem while she was pregnant, so she was going to punish her once she had her baby. But Halibel just wasn't going to let anything happen. He could have one-shot her if she tried anything anyway. Eventually, Subaru and Co find the light ball from the Oni girl, return it to Zarestia, and then take the life of the Oni girl. And we then get a final long time skip to where we see Subaru and his entire family. But Rigel, Subaru's son, comes across Zarestia on his own. And Zarestia gives Rigel a gift that allows him to call upon her if he needs her, as she thinks of Rigel as her younger brother due to the bond that she created with Rem and her family. is actually pretty wholesome, as the Restia normally thinks of destroying everything in sight, but at the sight of Rigel, she was able to resist that urge. Sloth Subaru ends up living the rest of his days in Kararagi with his family, and that's pretty much it. Next up we have Greed Subaru. This Subaru has his test presented to him the moment that Echidna proposed that she could help him save everyone as long as he formed a contract with her. Upon finding out her true intentions to use Subaru to pursue infinite knowledge at any cost, he's disgusted by her and he chooses to turn down her offer. This if story explores what happens if Subaru decided to take her hand despite what he found out, as he had given up on saving all of his friends on his own. We start the story by finding out that Subaru was actually able to complete the trials in the sanctuary and get everybody out of the sanctuary, and some time passes since this event and many things have changed. First, Subaru and Echidna can always communicate with one another no matter what, while Echidna is able to watch Subaru's actions through a pendant that she gave to him when they formed a contract. Second, Subaru has died over 100 million times, so he's become desensitized to everything. Third, he did not want Reinhard as an enemy, so he managed to manipulate Felt into abandoning the entire royal selection thing and recruit Reinhard into the Amelia camp soon after. Fourth, Subaru forced Beatrice and Garfield to leave their respective places in this timeline rather than convincing them to like he did in the original timeline, so this had huge effects on his relationships with them. Beatrice would not speak to Subaru, she'd cry endlessly, and Garfield was extremely insecure and depressed. Amelia also never completed the trials and Subaru had to do them for her, so she wasn't able to overcome her past either. This leaves Amelia unstable to a point where she can end up losing control of her powers, and this is very bad for everybody, as Reinhard is present in the Amelia camp and he will slay her if he must. However, Roswell really likes Subaru, more than even the original timeline, due to how much he's helped Roswell in his goals. It's almost as if he sees Subaru as a respectful equal of his. As we continue this day of Subaru's at the mansion, we see that he's nothing but an empty husk of himself, playing nothing but a role. And he sits down next to Rem, inquiring Echidna as to how he can save her. Echidna basically tells him that their only chance of saving Rem is to make Amelia the king of Lagunica in order to obtain the blood of Volcanica, as the other two options of finding the Sin Archbishops of Gluttony or the Sage are impossible. As the day comes to an end, Elsa returns to Subaru as her mission of locating Gluttony has led nowhere, and Subaru simply asks her to take his life, and she does easily. Why? Well, earlier that day, Petra had mentioned something about going outside to run errands, but she wasn't sure because of the weather. Subaru, after resetting that entire day, would have that same conversation with Petra again, but this time, he mentions how the weather would be that day. Yes, Subaru used Return by Death to tell Petra how the weather was going to be that day. And here we can see how Subaru ended up dying 100 million times, and just how little he values his own life in this side story. Now, we have Lust Subaru, and this is just like a harem story. Not much to talk about. Nobody acknowledges this guy exists. So let's move on to the most complicated of all, Gluttony Subaru. An event in Arc 6 takes place in where Subaru ends up losing all of his memories from the world of ReZero alone, reverting him to the Subaru we'd see in the very first episode of the series. There are also books called Books of the Dead. To keep this short, if someone has died in the world of ReZero, they have their own Book of the Dead created and stored in a library within the Pleiades Watchtower, which is where all of this is taking place at. These Book of the Dead contain all of the memories of the individual who have passed away from their perspective, and if you read too much of their book, eventually a voice that represents that person will corrupt your brain and become a part of you. I should also note that this is one of Subaru's most brutal adventures. So since Subaru has lost all of his memories within the Pleiades Watchtower, he's kind of stuck in a sticky situation where all of these people surrounding him, such as Amelia, Julius, Maylee, and more, are relying on him and his decision-making skills to save everybody and solve all the problems around them. But Subaru has no idea what they're talking about, he has none of the experiences of this world, and he's pushed to the edge as they keep speaking of him as this hero. Due to his ignorance, he's dying and failing his loops and just going through it. And Subaru eventually finds out that he can figure out who he was if he takes the lives of all of his closest friends who truly knew him. And then he can go and save them and end this hell he's going through. But he chooses not to, and continues walking forward with a newfound resolve to save everybody while finding himself despite the circumstances. This alternative route explores what happens if Subaru just decided to not move forward, take everybody's lives, and read their books of the dead in order to understand who he was in this world. And if I understand correctly, after completing this goal, he was going to take his own life, go back in time with all the information obtained, and save everybody, as he know who Subaru was by reading everybody's books of the dead. It's a very complicated story, and it does require you to know a lot and remember a lot about ReZero itself. Anyways, after Subaru takes the lives of everybody in the watchtower, he goes to the outside world and takes the lives of everybody that knew him as well. He eventually confronts Reinhard with the intention of warning him that he's gonna take his life too. But before Reinhard can do anything, he has Shallow, who's his devoted assistant, shoot a light beam towards Felt, who was pretty far from everything going on, and this gives Subaru the opportunity to escape. Aside from Subaru taking the lives of everybody he knew and implanting their voices in his head through reading their books, there are also two more tragic factors to the story. First, Subaru can never defeat Reinhard, so he's never going to achieve this goal despite his confidence in doing so. And second, this Subaru more than likely had his save point overwritten, and he cannot go back on his decision to take everybody's lives, making this entire thing pointless regardless of if he defeats Reinhard or not. Lastly, this Subaru has an appearance more different than the rest, as he has white hair, one doled out eye, and a pretty cool outfit. Overall, this is one of the more depressing ifs because there's really no ending that Subaru can get here unlike the others. And finally, we get to the Redeem If Subaru. This Subaru resembles Aldebaran in many ways if I remember correctly, but it's nothing more than that. This is Subaru in a timeline where after Rem dies at the hands of Betelgeuse and the Witch Cult, Reinhard finds him soon after and takes him in as a student. Eventually the two butt heads because Reinhard's not a fan of Subaru's obsession with Betelgeuse, and they end up separating because of their argument, and we get a 20-year time skip. Now we see this 30-year-old Subaru is pretty powerful, but nothing too crazy. He can hold his own against mob beasts or witch cultists, but he isn't hanging with Sin Archbishop solo. He's just like Aldebaran on the power scale, strong, but nothing to write home about. He's very reminiscent of Guts in terms of physical stats and weaponry. He even has a mechanical arm that's made of Rem's original weapon, the Morning Star, which allows him to shoot a retractable spear. We see that this Subaru is still obsessed with killing Betelgeuse and will do so by any means. He eventually recruits Elsa, Ferris, Mimi, and Beatrice into a party, and they work as a team throughout the story to eventually confront Betelgeuse. Subaru does want to fight Betelgeuse solo, so he takes Beatrice to battle him, while the others handle Betelgeuse's fingers so he can't escape. The story ends with Subaru managing to use the Life Sword, which is one of the 10 legendary swords of power in ReZero, and defeat Betelgeuse who possessed them by stabbing himself with the blade, as the blade destroys the soul of anybody it cuts. Once he passes away, Subaru regresses all the way back to his save point with Rem in Arc 3, and he just continues back on the main Envy storyline. This alternate storyline was only in a mobile game, but it's still pretty good, just doesn't have that much to it. You can actually find the whole YouTube series in the description down below, and if you look hard enough, you'll see me in the comments from like 2 years ago. I was a big ReZero fan. There are also other if routes that just show what would happen if certain characters help Subaru in certain arcs. Like there's a Priscilla if who would make arcs 1 through 3 a cakewalk for Subaru due to her strength and abilities. I mean, there's even one for Reinhard too. But Subaru himself isn't too different in these, as, you know, it's the same guy, he's just getting through everything much easier. With that said, that about covers all the Subarus for now, but Tappe can always just drop another at any time, so try to keep up with the story. Thank you guys so much for watching the video, and I'll catch you on the next one. Peace out.